Imagine the sting of it. On Mother's Day, my daughter showered her mother-in-law with a breathtaking $20,000 ring and a lavish cruise. What did I, her own mother, receive? A $5 plastic flower and a terse note. Yet, the very next day, my phone buzzed with 28 frantic calls. "Please, Mom," her voice pleaded, "don't sell the company. I'm so glad to have you here. Stay with me, follow my story to its end, and tell me where you're watching from so I can see how far my words have reached." At 67, I genuinely believed I'd weathered every storm life could offer, experienced every shade of heartbreak imaginable. I was profoundly mistaken. Mother's Day dawned, indistinguishable from any other quiet Sunday. I woke in my echoing house, brewed coffee for one, and fought back the thoughts of how eerily silent everything had become since Harold passed away 3 years ago. The quiet used to be a comfort, a peaceful respite. Lately, it served only as a constant, aching reminder of all the conversations that would never again fill these rooms. The night before, Oilia had called, her voice distant and formal, a thin veil over an expectation. "Mom, we're having brunch at David's mother's house tomorrow. You should come. 1 hour sharp." Should come. Not, "We'd love to have you," or "Please join us." Just an obligation cloaked unconvincingly as an invitation. Punctually at 1 when I arrived at Patricia's house. The driveway was already a gleaming parade of expensive cars, and the vibrant sound of laughter spilled freely from the backyard. Patricia had always embodied everything I wasn't: polished, effortlessly social, radiating an innate elegance. Her house looked as though it had been plucked directly from the pages of a high-end magazine, awash in white marble and fresh, artfully arranged flowers. As I stepped through the ornate gate, I saw them gathered around the patio table. Oilia sat close beside Patricia, their heads inclined together, sharing some private, hushed joke. My son-in-law, David, stood at the grill, embodying every bit the devoted son Patricia had so clearly raised him to be. "Colleen!" Patricia called out, her smile perfectly practiced, a bright, welcoming facade. "So glad you could make it." Oilia merely looked up, offering me a quick, almost dismissive nod. "Hi, Mom. You can sit over there." Her gesture pointed to an empty chair at the very far end of the table, distinctly removed from the main current of conversation. I settled quietly, a silent observer in a bustling scene, watching as everyone chatted about shared histories and inside jokes I wasn't a part of. David's sister was there with her children, Patricia's bridge club friends, even the neighbors. Everyone seemed to belong, to be an integral part of the fabric of the gathering. Everyone, it seemed, but me. Then came the gift exchange. "Oh, Patricia," Oilia announced, standing up with an almost feverish excitement I hadn't witnessed from her in years. "We have something special for you." David appeared seamlessly beside her, carrying a small velvet box and a pristine envelope. Patricia gasped as she opened the box. Inside was a stunning diamond ring, the kind that caught and refracted light from across the entire room, demanding attention. "Oilia, honey, this is too much!" Patricia exclaimed, her hand flying to her mouth. "It's not too much for the woman who raised such an incredible son," Oilia gushed, embracing Patricia tightly. "And there's more." The envelope yielded cruise tickets. 2 weeks in the Mediterranean with first-class accommodations. Patricia actually began to weep, real tears tracing paths down her cheeks, and everyone applauded while Oilia beamed with unbridled pride. I felt something cold, a heavy weight, settle deep in my stomach. $20,000 at least, maybe even more. "And now for Grandma Colleen," David said, though his voice had noticeably lost some of its earlier enthusiasm. Oilia walked over to me, holding a small gift bag. Inside was a plastic flower, the kind you'd find nestled in a dollar store bin, and a card that looked suspiciously like a last-minute grab from a drugstore rack. I opened the card. The pre-printed message read, "Happy Mother's Day," and beneath it, in Oilia's hurried handwriting, "Thanks for everything, Mom. Thanks for everything." It felt as impersonal as if I were a cashier at a grocery store. The table fell silent. I could feel every eye on me, expectant, waiting for my reaction. Patricia cleared her throat, a soft, uncomfortable sound. Even David looked visibly embarrassed. "It's lovely," I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. "Thank you, dear." But Oilia had already pivoted, turning back to Patricia, launching into an animated, excited story about the cruise destinations they'd chosen. The conversation flowed on without me, and I sat there, clutching my $5 plastic flower, feeling smaller and more insignificant than I had in years. I endured another hour, a silent witness as my own daughter lavished attention and affection on a woman she had known for only 12 years, while treating me as a mere afterthought. When I finally announced my need to leave, Oilia barely glanced up. "Thanks for coming, Mom. Drive safe." The drive home was a blur, a haze of unbidden thoughts. My mind kept circling back to that dazzling ring, those lavish cruise tickets, the pure, unadulterated joy on Oilia's face as she presented them. When was the last time she had looked at me that way? When was the last time she had put any real thought, any genuine effort into something she gave me? I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long, drawn-out moment, staring blankly at that ridiculous plastic flower. 43 years of being her mother, and this was my worth. A last-minute clearance aisle afterthought. That night, sleep was an impossible luxury. I endlessly replayed the scene, the sting of it burning, wondering where I had gone so profoundly wrong. I had built a successful company from the ground up, employed dozens of people, contributed meaningfully to my community. Yet somehow, I had failed at the one thing that mattered most, being worthy of my daughter's love. I eventually rose and walked to my home office, the sanctuary where I kept all my important documents, financial statements, tax returns, business contracts, everything that represented my life's work. And it was there, amidst the neatly organized files, that I began to wonder, what exactly had I built all of this for? The sleepless night bled into a sleepless week. I couldn't dislodge the image of that plastic flower from my mind, or the memory of the genuine affection that shone in Oilia's eyes when she looked at Patricia. It gnawed at me like a physical ache, a persistent, dull pain. I decided I needed answers. Not the kind that come from angry confrontations or dramatic emotional outbursts, but real answers. The kind hidden away in bank statements and old, forgotten receipts. I dedicated the following Saturday to my office, pulling out dusty filing cabinets I hadn't touched in years. Harold used to playfully tease me about being a pack rat, meticulously keeping every document, every single receipt. "You never know when you might need proof," I used to tell him, half joking. I never, not in my wildest dreams, imagined I would need proof of my own motherhood. The very first file I opened was clearly labeled, Oilia College. Inside were meticulously documented tuition payments, room and board receipts, and dozens of smaller expenses I had long since forgotten about. Textbooks, a new laptop, even the occasional parking tickets she'd accumulated on campus. $47,000 total. And that wasn't even including the car I had bought her junior year when hers unexpectedly broke down. But that was merely the beginning. Next, I unearthed the folder specifically marked Wedding O&D. A single day, meticulously documented, costing a staggering $58,000. The venue, the elaborate floral arrangements, the catering, her exquisite dress, the photographer capturing every fleeting moment. I had insisted on covering every last expense. My sole desire was for her day to be nothing short of perfect. David's parents, in contrast, had contributed a solitary case of wine. Then came the house files. When Oilia and David first married, they set their sights on a dream home in the exclusive Riverside district. Their combined income, however, fell woefully short of the mortgage requirements for the property they desired. Without hesitation, I co-signed. 2 years later, when David's business encountered a severe rough patch, I quietly assumed the mortgage payments for 6 consecutive months. They never knew. I had ensured that. The car payments were next. 3 distinct vehicles over the years, each one presented as, just a loan until we get back on our feet. Yet somehow, those loans were never repaid, and I, in turn, never asked. I simply silently absorbed the payments into my ever-growing monthly expenses. But it was the emergency fund file that truly struck a painful chord. In 2019, David's landscaping business had teetered on the brink of collapse. He had made a series of ill-advised investments, trusted the wrong people, and they were staring down the barrel of bankruptcy. Oilia had called me, her voice ragged with sobs, desperately begging for help. I transferred $85,000 that very same day. There were no contracts, no repayment plans, just a mother instinctively helping her child. They bought a new boat 6 months later. I leaned back in my chair, staring blankly at the calculator display. Over the past 15 years, I had given or spent nearly $400,000 on Oilia and David. College tuition, their wedding, the house, the cars, business bailouts, and countless smaller expenses I had stopped tracking years ago. $400,000. More than most people would ever see in an entire lifetime. And yesterday, my reward was a plastic flower. The truly painful part wasn't the money itself. I had made sound investments over the years, meticulously building a successful consulting firm. I could easily afford to be generous. The agonizing realization was that my generosity had become utterly invisible to Oilia. It was expected, taken completely for granted. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our text conversations from the past year. Her messages were consistently brief, purely functional. Can you pick up the dry cleaning? David needs to borrow your truck. The kids need school supplies. Always asking, never offering, never a spontaneous, "How are you, Mom?" or a simple, "Thinking of you." But Patricia, a relative stranger, received cruise tickets and diamond rings. I found myself opening my laptop, my fingers instinctively typing, pulling up the mortgage details for Oilia's house. Still in my name, of course. The payments came directly from my business account, automated years ago to spare me the thought. That business account. I pulled up the monthly statements and began scrutinizing them line by line. David's lawn service maintained the grounds at 3 of my commercial properties. I paid him 30% above the market rate, a fact I had, of course, never mentioned. Oilia's part-time bookkeeping work for my smaller clients brought her a comfortable $100-200 a month for perhaps 6 hours of work. They weren't just my daughter and son-in-law. They were my dependents. Adults in their 30s who had meticulously structured their lives, their entire lifestyle, around my constant financial support. And somehow, in their narrative, I had become the villain, the distant mother who simply couldn't understand them, who couldn't possibly relate to their struggles. They had painted me as cold and disconnected, all while systematically living off my generosity. I closed the laptop, my gaze sweeping across my office. Photos adorned the walls, showcasing me at various company events. Awards from the Chamber of Commerce, newspaper clippings celebrating business successes. Yet, a stark absence remained. There were no recent pictures of Oilia and me together. She had stopped wanting to take photos with me years ago. The clock on my desk glowed 4:30 p.m. I had spent 8 hours meticulously sifting through documents, and the picture that emerged was agonizingly clear. I had spent years attempting to buy my daughter's love, and all I had achieved was to indoctrinate her into viewing me as an endless source of money, rather than a wellspring of affection. My phone buzzed, vibrating on the desk. A text from Oilia. "Mom, David's truck broke down. Can we borrow yours for a few days?" I stared at the message for a long, quiet moment before composing my response. "I'll think about it." It was the first time in years I hadn't immediately said yes. That night, I made a decision that would irrevocably alter everything. I called my attorney. Monday morning found me seated across from Margaret Chen, my attorney of 12 years. Her office offered a sweeping view of downtown, and from her window, I could clearly see my own building, a towering reminder of everything I had painstakingly built over the decades. "Colleen, you look tired," Margaret observed, settling behind her desk with a steaming cup of tea. "What's on your mind?" I had rehearsed this conversation countless times in my head all weekend, but sitting there, the words felt heavy, laden with unspoken weight. "I want to discuss selling my business." Margaret's eyebrows shot up, a clear flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Hartwell Consulting? But you've spent 30 years building that company. It's your legacy." "That's precisely the problem," I said quietly, the truth settling around me. "I need to understand what would happen to my family if I sold." I watched Margaret's expression shift as she grasped that this was no casual inquiry. She pulled out a fresh legal pad, her professional mask smoothly sliding into place. "Walk me through your concerns," she prompted. Over the next hour, I laid out everything I had painstakingly discovered. The quiet mortgage payments, the subtly structured business contracts, the intricate web of financial dependence I had, unknowingly, woven. Margaret took diligent notes, occasionally interjecting with a clarifying question, but her face remained carefully neutral, betraying no judgment. "So, if you sold the business," she stated finally, her voice even, "David would lose his primary commercial contracts, Oilia would lose her bookkeeping income, and they'd need to qualify for their mortgage independently." "Exactly," I affirmed. Margaret leaned back in her chair, a contemplative look on her face. "Colleen, may I ask what prompted this drastic consideration? The last time we spoke, you were talking about expanding the business, perhaps even bringing Oilia in as a partner." I then told her about Mother's Day, about the stinging contrast of the plastic flower and the dazzling diamond ring, about years of feeling like nothing more than an ATM with legs. Margaret listened without interruption, though I caught a subtle wince at certain painful details. "I see," she said quietly when I finished, her gaze steady. "And you're thinking of selling as a way to find out who my daughter really is?" I finished, the question hanging in the air. "Right now, I don't know if she loves me or my checkbook." Margaret nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on her face. "There are ways to approach this gradually, Colleen. We could restructure your business arrangements, perhaps transition some of the financial support over time." "No," I said firmly, cutting her off. "Gradual change merely gives people time to adjust, to find new ways to manipulate the situation. If I'm going to do this, it needs to be clean, definitive." We spent another hour meticulously discussing the logistics. Margaret had extensive contacts in the business brokerage world, specialists in consulting firms like mine. She estimated the entire process would take between 3 to 6 months, depending on how quickly we moved forward. "I'll need complete confidentiality," I emphasized. No one can know until the sale is finalized. Of course, Margaret affirmed. But Colleen, once you do this, there's truly no going back. Are you prepared for how Oilia might react? I thought about that cheap plastic flower still sitting on my kitchen counter. I'm prepared for her to show me exactly who she is. That afternoon, I began making subtle but significant changes. I called David's landscaping company and informed them I was considering switching to a different service for my commercial properties. Budget constraints, I explained smoothly. I need to get competitive bids. The panic in his voice was immediate and palpable. Mrs. Hartwell, we can negotiate, maybe lower our rates. It's not about the rates, David, I replied, my voice steady. It's about exploring my options. Next, I contacted my smaller clients who utilized Oilia for bookkeeping services. I explained that I was restructuring my referral arrangements, and they would need to find new services within 60 days. Professional, businesslike, no personal explanations offered. Oilia called that evening, her voice tight with thinly veiled worry. Mom, Mrs. Patterson said you're not referring bookkeepers anymore. Did I do something wrong? Not at all, dear, I responded, maintaining my composure. I'm just simplifying my business operations. But I need those clients, she protested, a hint of desperation creeping in. That's my income. I'm sure you'll find other opportunities, I said calmly, deliberately. You're very capable. There was a long, uncomfortable pause on her end. Mom, is everything okay? You've been acting strange lately. I'm fine, Oilia. Just busy with some business matters. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring once again at that silent, plastic flower. For the first time in years, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Control. Not the kind that came from writing checks or solving problems, but the profound kind that stems from making your own choices, from charting your own course. The next few weeks settled into a deliberate routine. I met with potential buyers, meticulously reviewed financial statements, and methodically disentangled the myriad threads that bound my thriving business to my daughter's established lifestyle. Margaret handled the bulk of the legal work, but I insisted on being involved in every single decision. The hardest part, by far, was the secrecy. I had never been adept at keeping things from Oilia, even when discretion probably would have been wise. But this felt profoundly different. This felt necessary. 3 weeks into the process, I received a call from David. Mrs. Hartwell, he began, his voice edged with a mix of concern and accusation. I heard from someone at the Chamber of Commerce that you might be selling your business. Is that true? My heart pounded in my chest, a rapid drumbeat, but my voice stayed steady. People gossip, David. You know how it is. But if you were selling, you'd tell us, right? I mean, it would affect our contracts. If and when I make any major business decisions, you'll be informed appropriately. That night, Oilia showed up at my door. She looked utterly exhausted, her hair pulled back messily, wearing an old sweatshirt I remembered from her college days. Mom, we need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the living room without an invitation. David's contracts, my bookkeeping clients, now rumors about you selling the business? What's going on? I sat down across from her, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I'm reevaluating my priorities. What does that mean? It means I'm 67 years old, and I'm tired of carrying everyone else's responsibilities. Oilia's face flushed, a hint of anger rising. Is this about Mother's Day? About the gift? I'm sorry if you didn't like it, but we've been really tight on money lately. I almost laughed. Tight on money, she claimed, while living in a house I paid for, driving cars I'd bought, working jobs I'd arranged. But I held my tongue. Instead, I simply looked at her and said, This isn't about one day, Oilia. This is about understanding what really matters. She left 20 minutes later, frustrated and utterly confused. I watched her drive away in the car I'd co-signed for, heading back to the house where I paid the mortgage. But not for much longer. The pivotal call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing the final purchase agreement. Margaret had successfully found a buyer, a larger expanding consulting firm looking to broaden their regional presence. The offer was generous, more than I'd expected, and I felt a sense of vindication. My phone rang just as I was signing the preliminary documents. The caller ID showed my home number, which was peculiar, as I was sitting in Margaret's office. "Hello, Mrs. Hartwell. This is James Morrison from Morrison & Associates. I'm trying to reach you regarding the acquisition of Hartwell Consulting." My blood ran cold. "I'm sorry. Who is this?" "James Morrison. My firm is handling the due diligence for the purchase. I may have dialed the wrong number. I was trying to reach your office." "You called my home number?" "Oh, I apologize. Someone answered and said they were your assistant. They gave me permission to discuss the details of the sale." I closed my eyes, a wave of sickening realization washing over me. Only one person had a key to my house. Only one person would answer my private phone and brazenly pretend to possess authority they didn't have. "Thank you for calling, Mr. Morrison. Please direct all future communications through my attorney, Margaret Chen." I hung up and immediately dialed my house number. It rang 4 times before Oilia answered. "Mom's house, this is Oilia." "What are you doing in my house?" There was a noticeable pause. Then her voice changed completely, becoming falsely sweet. "Mom, I thought you were at some meeting. I just came by to water your plants." "I don't have plants that need watering, Oilia." Another pause. This one longer, more strained. "Okay, fine. I was looking for something. David said you might have some old tax documents he needs, and you answered my phone because it kept ringing. I thought it might be something important." Important. I could hear the fragile edifice of her lies crumbling in her voice. "Oilia, I'm coming home. We need to talk." The drive from Margaret's office to my house normally took 15 minutes, but today it felt like hours. My mind raced, replaying that phone call. The audacious way Oilia had pretended to be my assistant, authorized to discuss confidential business matters. The sheer nerve of it was breathtaking. When I pulled into my driveway, Oilia's car was still there. I found her in my home office, sitting at my desk, with various papers scattered around her. She looked up as I walked in, her face a chaotic mixture of defiance and guilt. "Find what you were looking for?" I asked, my voice calm, almost unnervingly so. She gestured vaguely at the documents. "Mom, what is this? You're really selling the company?" I walked over, beginning to gather the scattered papers, purchase agreements, financial statements, confidentiality documents, everything she absolutely should not have seen. "These are private business matters." "Private? Mom, this affects all of us. David's business depends on your contracts. My income comes from your referrals. You can't just sell without talking to us." I stopped collecting the papers and truly looked at her. She was 35 years old, sitting in my chair at my desk, demanding explanations for decisions about my own business. When had I allowed this shift to happen? "Actually, Oilia, I can sell my business without consulting anyone. It's my company." "But what about us? What about our family?" "What about our family?" I repeated the question slowly, letting each word sink in. "When did you start caring about our family?" Her face flushed, a flash of righteous indignation. "I've always cared. You're my mother." "Am I?" I pressed, my gaze unwavering. "Or am I your bank?" The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, the faint sounds of normal life continuing, while mine, it seemed, fell apart around me. Oilia's voice was smaller, almost a whisper, when she finally spoke again. "Mom, if you're upset about Mother's Day, I already apologized. We can do something special next year." "Next year?" I said quietly, the words laced with a bitter irony. "Like the year after that, and the year after that? Always next year, when it comes to treating me with respect." I sat down in the chair across from my own desk, looking at my daughter as if seeing her clearly for the very first time. "Do you know how much money I've given you and David over the years?" She shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "We never asked you to keep track." $400,000, I stated plainly, the number hanging heavy in the air. "Not including the mortgage I'm still paying on your house, or the business contracts I've arranged for David, or the referrals that provide your income." Oilia's mouth opened slightly, then closed. She clearly hadn't expected me to have actual, precise numbers. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty," I continued, my voice steady. "I'm telling you this because I need you to understand something. I've been subsidizing your entire adult life, and somehow along the way, you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as a resource." "That's not true," she protested, but her conviction wavered. "Isn't it?" I challenged gently. "When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked how I was doing? How I was handling your father's death? Whether I was lonely in this big, empty house?" Her face crumpled, a mixture of shock and dawning realization. "Mom, when Patricia got a $20,000 ring and a cruise, and I got a plastic flower, it wasn't about the money. It was about the thought, the care, the consideration. You spent more time picking out Patricia's gift than you did thinking about mine." Tears began to roll down her cheeks, but I couldn't stop. The words, pent up for years, had finally begun to flow. "You treat Patricia like family because she doesn't give you anything. You have to earn her affection. But me? I'm just expected to provide, to support, to enable your lifestyle without question. I love you, Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Do you?" I challenged, my voice cutting through the air. "Or do you love what I can do for you?" She couldn't answer that question. We both knew why. My phone rang, shattering the heavy silence between us. The caller ID showed David's name. "Don't answer it," Oilia said quickly, her eyes wide with alarm. I picked up the phone. "Hello, David." "Mrs. Hartwell. Oilia told me about the business sale. We need to talk about this as a family. This decision affects all of us." "Actually, David, it doesn't," I countered, my voice calm and resolute. "It affects me. It's my business to sell." "But our contracts, our livelihood?" "Your livelihood has been my responsibility for too long," I interjected, cutting him off. "It's time for you both to take care of yourselves." I hung up the phone and looked at Oilia, who was staring at me as if she had never truly seen me before. "Mom, you can't be serious about this," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." That's when the panic truly set in for her. The next morning, my phone started ringing precisely at 6:47 a.m. Oilia's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately, then again. By the time I finished my coffee, she'd called 12 times. I finally answered on the 13th call. "Mom, please, we need to talk about this." "We talked yesterday, Oilia. I think I was quite clear. You can't just destroy our lives because you're upset about a Mother's Day gift." I set down my coffee cup, feeling that familiar, weary anger begin to rise within me. This has nothing to do with one gift, and you know it. Then what? What do you want from me? I want you to understand that I'm not your personal ATM. I want you to see me as a person, not merely a source of funding. I do see you as a person. You're my mother. When was the last time you treated me like one? Silence. A profound, uncomfortable silence. Then, her voice small and desperate. Mom, if you sell the business, we'll lose everything. The house, David's contracts, my clients. We'll have to start over. Yes, I confirmed, my voice unwavering. You will. And maybe that's exactly what you need. She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, she called back. Then again. Then again. I stopped counting after the 15th call. Each voicemail was a variation on the same desperate theme. Pleading, bargaining, threatening, manipulating. She cycled through every tactic she had learned and refined over the years. Mom, please call me back. We can work this out. Mom, David's having chest pains from the stress. Do you want to put him in the hospital? Mom, I'm so sorry about the flour. I'll make it up to you. Just please don't sell the company. Mom, everyone's going to think you're being vindictive and cruel. Is that really how you want people to remember you? By noon, she'd called 28 times. I knew because I'd started keeping count. Each call was a stark testament to her mounting desperation. She was finally, truly beginning to understand what I'd been trying to convey. That her entire life, her comfortable existence, was built on the foundation of my unwavering generosity, and I was utterly exhausted by being taken for granted. The doorbell chimed at 2:30 p.m. I peered through the peephole and saw Oilia standing on my porch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. David stood behind her, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. I opened the door, but made no gesture of invitation for them to enter. Mom, please, Oilia began immediately, her voice pleading. We need to talk about this like adults. We tried that yesterday, I stated, my voice even. You weren't interested in talking. You were interested in accessing my private documents and pretending to be my assistant. David stepped forward, his jaw tight. Mrs. Hartwell, with all due respect, this is affecting more than just you. We have a family to think about. So do I said quietly, meeting his gaze. I have to think about what's best for my family. And right now, what's best is for all of you to learn to stand on your own feet. Oilia's face crumpled further. Mom, I'm begging you. Please don't do this. You're begging me now, I observed, the irony not lost on me. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me to dinner that wasn't a holiday obligation? When was the last time you called just to say you love me? She opened her mouth, then closed it. We all knew the answer. I thought so, I said, a sigh escaping me. You only call when you need something. You only visit when you want something. You only care when you're about to lose something. David's anger finally erupted, raw and unfiltered. This is ridiculous. You're punishing us for being successful, for building a life together. Successful? I let out a short, humorless laugh. David, you're 37 years old, and you've never made a single mortgage payment on your own house. Oilia's entire income comes from work. I arranged for her. You call that successful? We call it family, Oilia cried, her voice breaking. Families help each other. Help goes both ways, Oilia. What have you done to help me? What have you contributed to this family besides taking? The question hung in the air like a challenge, undeniable. Oilia looked at David, then back at me, searching frantically for an answer that simply didn't exist. I gave you grandchildren. she said finally, her voice barely a whisper, grasping at straws. No, you didn't, I countered, my voice sharper than I intended, but the truth needed to be spoken. You moved 3 states away and visit twice a year? I haven't seen Tommy and Sarah in 8 months. Her face went white. Even David looked deeply uncomfortable. You want to know what family looks like? I continued, my voice gaining momentum. Patricia's family calls her every week. They visit without being asked. They remember her birthday without being reminded. They give her thoughtful gifts because they pay attention to what she likes. That's why she got the ring and the cruise. That's why she's treated like someone who matters. Oilia was openly sobbing now, but I couldn't stop. Years of simmering hurt were finally pouring out. I spent 30 years building a business so I could provide for my family. I wanted to give you security, opportunities, a better life than I had. But somewhere along the way, you and David stopped appreciating what I gave you and started expecting it. You stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. Mom, please, she whispered, her voice barely audible over her sobs. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'll be better. You're sorry because you're scared, I stated, my voice unwavering. You're not sorry because you understand what you did wrong. David grabbed Oilia's arm, his patience finally snapping. Come on, we're wasting our time here. She's made up her mind. But Oilia pulled away from him, her gaze fixed on me with something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine vulnerability. Mom, what do you want from me? Tell me what I need to do to fix this. I looked at my daughter, truly looked at her. 35 years old, crying on my doorstep, finally asking the right question. But it felt agonizingly late. I want you to figure out who you are without my money, I said. I want you to learn to value relationships that aren't transactional. I want you to understand that love isn't about what someone can give you. And then what? She pleaded, desperation clinging to her words. If I do all that, will you change your mind? I shook my head slowly, definitively. Oilia, I'm not selling the business to punish you. I'm selling it to free myself. I'm 67 years old, and I want to find out what my life looks like when I'm not responsible for everyone else's choices. I stepped back and began to close the door. Mom, wait! She called out, her voice ragged. I love you. I really do love you. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I love you too, Oilia. That's why I'm doing this. Then I closed the door, listening to her cries on my porch for the next 10 minutes before they finally drove away. The sale would be final in 2 weeks. 3 months after the sale closed, I was sitting on the porch of my new cottage, watching the sunset paint the lake in breathtaking shades of gold and pink. The house was considerably smaller than what I'd left behind, but it was mine in a way the old house never had been. No lingering memories of failed expectations, no echoing rooms filled with disappointment. The move had been surprisingly easy. 30 years of business files, contracts, and correspondence were all boxed up and stored away in a distant unit. I kept only what truly mattered. A few cherished photos, Harold's favorite well-worn books, and the delicate quilt my own mother had made when Oilia was born. The cottage came fully furnished, which suited me perfectly. I had no desire to drag the past, or its weighty furniture, into this fresh chapter of life. The previous owners had left behind simple, comfortable furnishings and a garden that quietly yearned for tending. I'd never had the luxury of time for gardening before, but now I had nothing but time. Oilia hadn't called in 6 weeks. The silence, initially, was a deep ache, but with each passing day, it also brought a profound clarity. I had spent so many years measuring my worth by her approval, her sporadic visits, her endless needs. Now, slowly but surely, I was learning to measure it by my own newfound peace of mind. The business sale had provided more than enough money for a comfortable, independent retirement. I had thoughtfully set up a trust for my grandchildren's education, ensuring they would receive the funds directly when they turned 18, with no strings attached and no parental access. It was my quiet way of ensuring they would have genuine opportunities without inadvertently enabling their parents' reliance. I had also quietly paid off the remaining mortgage on Patricia's house. Oilia and David's house, not as a gift, but as a final, decisive severance. They now owned their home free and clear, but they also knew, unequivocally, that they would never receive another penny from me. It was the very last check I would ever write for them. My phone rang, gently pulling me from my reverie. I glanced at the caller ID. Susan, my neighbor from across the lake. We'd become fast friends over the past month, bonding easily over morning walks and evening glasses of wine on our respective docks. Colleen, are you free for dinner tomorrow? My son and daughter-in-law are visiting, and I'd absolutely love for you to meet them. I'd like that, I said, and realized, with a soft smile, that I truly meant it. Susan's relationship with her children was everything mine had never been. Natural, reciprocal, built on genuine affection rather than obligation. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked down to the dock. The water was perfectly still, a shimmering canvas reflecting the last, tender light of day. A family of ducks paddled by, the tiny ducklings following their mother in a perfect, unwavering line. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a fleeting moment, my heart leaped, instinctively thinking it might be Oilia. But it was from Margaret, my attorney. Thought you'd want to know. David's landscaping business filed for bankruptcy yesterday. Oilia's looking for work at the elementary school. How are you doing? I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. I'm doing well. Thank you for letting me know. I felt a flicker of sadness for them, a quiet ache, but no guilt. They were adults who had made their own choices. Now, they were learning to live with the consequences, just like everyone else in the world. A loon called across the water, its haunting, melancholic cry echoing off the hills in the fading light. I'd never heard that sound before moving here. There were so many things I had never experienced while I was busy being responsible for everyone else's life. Too consumed to notice the world around me. Tomorrow, I was starting a pottery class in town. Next week, I'd signed up for a book club. Small things, perhaps, but they were unequivocally mine. Chosen because they genuinely interested me, not because someone else needed me to do them. The strangest thing about this new life was how impossibly light I felt. For years, I had carried the oppressive weight of other people's problems, their poor decisions, their relentless financial struggles. I had tragically mistaken that suffocating weight for love, but it wasn't. It was enabling, and in the end, it had hurt us all, intertwined in its insidious web. Real love, I was slowly but surely learning, sometimes meant saying no. Sometimes it meant letting people struggle so they could truly grow. And sometimes, profoundly, it meant walking away so they could finally find their own strength. 6 months later, I received a letter. Not a phone call, not a hurried text, but an actual, tangible, handwritten letter. The return address was Oilia's, but the handwriting itself was different, somehow more careful, more deliberate than I remembered. Dear Mom, it began. I've been trying to write this letter for months, but I never knew what to say. I kept wanting to ask you to come back to fix things, to make everything the way it was before. But I finally understand that the way things were before wasn't good for any of us. I set the letter down for a moment, taking a deep, fortifying breath before continuing. David and I are getting divorced. I know you probably heard about the bankruptcy, about me working at the school. It's been the hardest year of my life, but also, in a strange way, the most honest. I had to learn who I was without your money, without your safety net. I had to figure out how to take care of myself. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I'm writing to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for taking you for granted. I'm sorry for treating you like an obligation instead of a person. I'm sorry for all the years I wasted being angry at you for things that weren't your fault. I understand now why you sold the business. You weren't punishing me. You were freeing both of us. I just wish it hadn't taken me this long to see it. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I'm not asking you to. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you tried to tell me. Family isn't about what you can give someone or what they can give you. It's about showing up, paying attention, and caring about someone for who they are, not what they can do for you. I hope you're happy, Mom. I hope you found the peace you were looking for. You deserve it. Love, Oilia. P.S. I kept the plastic flower. It's on my kitchen windowsill, and every time I see it, I remember the look on your face that day. I remember the moment I realized I'd broken your heart. I'm sorry it took me so long to care about fixing it. I sat on my porch for a long time after reading that letter, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the water in hues of twilight. Then I went inside and wrote a response. Dear Oilia, I began. Thank you for your letter. It means more to me than you know. But I didn't mail it that day, or the next day, or the next. Some wounds, I realized, need time to heal completely before they can be safely reopened. Some relationships need space, a period of quiet, before they can even begin to be rebuilt on a new foundation of truth instead of obligation. Maybe someday we'd find our way back to each other. But for now, I was content to be free. Free from guilt, free from manipulation. Free from the exhausting, thankless job of trying to buy love that should have been given freely, unconditionally. I was 67 years old, and for the first time in decades, I was truly living my own life. It was enough. Now, I'm curious about you, the person listening to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.